Welcome, my name is Donna, so Donna Hill, and I'm the Educator Manager for a children's charity called Life Education Wessex in Thames Valley. Doesn't really explain what we do at all. Generally, most of my life is working in schools, managing a team that work in schools, looking after health, drug and emotional wellbeing education. But a big element of what we do is working with children around the issues of friendship and emotional resilience, and we run some bullying workshops as well. We also run workshops around bullying for school staff, lunchtime supervisors, TAs and teachers. So kind of we go from the angle of teachers and children. Can I just ask, out of the people that are here, are you here as parents or professionals? Parents? Professionals? Yeah, professionals that have kids as well, probably at some point, yeah. So we're a whole mix of people. And actually, whenever I go to these events, I kind of do this because I'm a professional and a parent, and I think you get something from both. Also, when we're running a workshop like this, I think it's always important to say right at the beginning that bullying can be a really emotive subject. And it can be, whether you're here as a professional or as a parent, we were also children once, and we may have experienced it ourselves, or seen it or witnessed it, or have someone that's emotively involved in it. So it can be a really challenging subject. And I sit on both sides of that as well. Even though this is what I do for a living, my youngest daughter, experienced bullying. And I experienced it as a child as well. So I kind of know where the emotions come from with it. So the purpose of today, this is where the technology. Okay, so the objectives of today, we're going to have a quick think about what bullying actually is. And actually that's really important because it can get really misunderstood and misinterpreted as well. We're going to, it says a quick quiz, don't panic, there's no quizzes involved. We're just going to think about some of the wording around bullying and some of the definitions of it. We are also going to think about how we can support our child. So whether you're here as a professional or as a parent or practitioner, we're supporting children through this, which can be a really challenging thing to do. And also, obviously, ask any questions. This is your workshop, so you can ask questions, discuss items as we're going along. All of that is very much welcomed. Okay, so let's start off with, what is bullying? This is out to you. I know you came here for answers, but what do you think bullying is? Anyone?
So when someone does something to another person with a deliberate intention of upsetting them.
Absolutely, look at that textbook answer, I like it. Yeah, so one person to another person or a group of people, and it's the deliberate hurtful intention with it as well. Anything else?
People call it banter, teasing.
Yeah. Oh, do you know, that word is really quite popular at the moment, isn't it? Banter. Has been around for the last couple of years. Bit of bants. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't really mean it, it's just a bit of bants. Well, actually, if it's deliberately hurtful, then that's not banter, is it? And banter is when both people, I always say, both people are kind of taking part in it and okay with the process. But if it's one person having power over the other person, then that stops being bants anymore. Okay, so what is bullying? It's quite a long list. There's not actually a legal definition of what bullying is, but what we tend to think of it as being one person with another person deliberately hurtful. It's also repeated, so this isn't a one-off type of behaviour, something that's repeated and can be persistent over a period of time. And I think you mentioned as well the intention to hurt someone either physically or emotionally. So this isn't just a physical thing. When people think about bullying, they think it tends to be physical. The emotional side of it actually is just as harmful, if not worse, and actually incredibly difficult to prove sometimes as well. There are certain groups that are more vulnerable to bullying than others, and sometimes it's around race or religion or gender. But it can take many forms. So we've got physical, we've got teasing. We find with younger groups of children as well, it can sometimes be deliberately leaving them out. So it's an indirect type of bullying as well. And yeah, the last one on there, the good old cyberbullying. Yeah, so and normally that gets mentioned quite a lot because people, you know, it's really quite prevalent. I mean, actually the statistics tell us that You know, not every child is being bullied online, and children are actually quite good at keeping themselves safe online. The difficulty being online is knowing how to react to things, and that's a lot of the work that we do in schools with children, talking to them. So if this happens, if someone says something to you, how do you react to it, and making the best choices on how to keep yourself safe. Okay, so bullying versus relational conflict. When I talk to kids about this, we just say, you know, I don't tend to call it relational conflict. We call it, you know, having a bit of argy-bargy, falling out with friends, because kids fall out with each other all the time, every day. And working in schools, you know, you're always hearing, oh, miss, they wouldn't let me play, oh, miss, they wouldn't let me do this, especially working in primary, which is the majority of my work. Bullying, repeated hurtful behaviour, deliberate, imbalance of power, and very little remorse. So when the other person then knows what their behaviour has done, there's not a lot of remorse from it. In comparison to relational conflict, children falling out, it will happen, but it's probably more likely to be occasional rather than repeated, persistent. Accidental, equal power, so sometimes, you know, they've just fallen out. And also, that's the most difficult thing sometimes, is some children don't get on with each other. And that doesn't mean it's bullying. It just means that there's a you know, you hear it, a clash of personalities. But there is an effort to solve the problem. And that effort to solve the problem might be that they just don't have anything to do with each other, and that resolves it. So, this is the quiz bit. It's not really a quiz, is it? Okay, so head teachers and governing bodies must by law have a policy to prevent all forms of bullying. True or false? True. Absolutely, yeah. By law, 2006 Education and Inspections Act say that schools must have a bullying policy. It's an anti-bullying policy, and it's normally part of the behaviour policy. Where can we find that, do you think? We're looking for it.
Schools' policies on their websites.
Yeah, so it should be on their website, so we should be able to access it. And I always say, you know, have a look at them. Have a look at what's going on. When I'm working in schools, my first thing is always to say to the staff that I'm working with, do you know what your policy is? Because not all policies are the same. They're written by the school. They just have to have one. So it's really important to know how we deal with these things. And actually, schools choose to deal with this in different ways.
They have to be reviewed as well, don't they? Policies have to be reviewed.
Yes, absolutely. So they're reviewed by the governing body of the school and the head teacher, and then staff also have to, you know, access them and be able to read them regularly and kind of sign to say that they're up to date with all their policies. Okay, so as I said, there isn't a legal term of what bullying actually is, but there are some forms of bullying that are covered by law. So any kind of violence or assault, or any theft or harassment or hate crime. Now, I'm not advocating that everyone goes rushing off to the police to report crimes of bullying, because there are lots of processes we go through first. So what would be the first step if we thought that we knew of a child that was being bullied? What would we do? Talk to the school. Yeah, absolutely. Get the school involved. And we'll think a little bit more about that later on as well. Okay, so what do you think? So this statement, being bullied tends to decrease with age. We're talking about children here. So do you think the older they get, the less likely they're to be bullied, or more likely?
It changes forms. So I'd say stays the same.
Okay. Staying the same, are we saying going up, going down? I think it gets worse with age. Okay. And that's generally what people say. But actually, the statistics tell us, so this is year 6, this is end of primary, and quite scarily actually, 18.7% of children reporting some form of bullying in year 6, and that drops to 7.5 by year 10. Can anyone think why?
I think they're less likely to report it, and they've learned to live with it longer.
Absolutely. You know,
Yeah, but peer pressure not to say anything is huge.
Yeah, it is, and they're fit, and they feel like they should be able to deal with it. And actually, I think it's probably a bit of both. I think actually by the time they get to year 10 or 11, they are older. They have built up a greater degree of resilience, so they may be more likely to be able to handle it or to deal with it themselves. But I think you're quite right. I think having worked in primary an awful long time, I think year 6s are much more likely. They're the top of the tree in their primary school, so actually they're much more likely to go and report, to verbalise when something's wrong. By the time they get to year 10, they're just thinking to get their head down and get out of school, and much less likely to report. And there is actually another positive reason why they're less likely to be bullied. It's actually by the time they've got to year 10 or 11, they've kind of grown a bit as well. And they are less likely to be a target because they've evened out a bit. When you look, I don't know if you've ever kind of looked at a year 6 class, they really vary in height. Some of them have grown and developed much more than others, so the younger ones are more vulnerable. By the time they get to this age, they're less likely to. Okay, so what are the signs and symptoms of bullying? How do we know that a young person might be being bullied?
Changing behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. Either way, actually, becoming more extrovert or more introvert, but the change is the important bit to note. You guys are having to work hard, aren't you, in a small group? I appreciate that. What else do you think might be the signs and effects?
Not going to go to school.
Yeah. Not engaging in school. Sorry, what was that?
Grumpiness.
Grumpiness, absolutely. Anything else?
Depression. Self-harm.
Yeah, we'll pull some up. Okay, so absent from school. The likelihood is, if there is an issue at school with bullying, they're not going to want to go. Because that's just self-preservation, isn't it? Keeping themselves away from it. Physical injuries. You know, unexplained physical injuries. Can't sleep or eat. So actually bullying can quite often be a very emotional thing for a young person to go through, but it can have a very physical effect on the body. So I know myself, I know if I'm really worried about something, I've got something on my mind, one of the first things to affect will be my sleep. So a young person may be having problems sleeping and their eating patterns as well. You can also find sometimes there's a prevalence on them trying to take control over their food as well, because actually they've got a lack of control over what's happening in other areas of their lives, so they will start to try and control other things. Reduced confidence, so yeah, becoming an introvert. I know with my daughter that was suffering and going through this, actually at home I would have never have known. And it was only from a couple of teachers saying, you know, she just doesn't seem to put her hand up, she doesn't seem to get involved. I was thinking, oh, that's not her, she's always got something to say. You know, but actually that was her way of trying to be anonymous at school, just wanting to keep her head underneath the radar so she wasn't standing out, so nobody would start. Stealing money. Now this used to always be on the list and quite high up the list, but actually it's much further down the list now. It's much less likely to be a sign of bullying. Can anyone think why at secondary school money wouldn't be such an issue? It's cashless, absolutely. Loads of the thumbprint stuff, so I was amazed when my children started secondary school that they didn't have to take money in with them. They just scanned their fingerprint and their money came off their dinner. Quite impressed by that. Okay, so becoming withdrawn. Lower achievement, so it has a knock-on effect to their academics. Lost belongings, becoming anxious. And actually, most of these might just mean you've got a teenager on your hands. It might not mean there's bullying going on. It might mean that they can't sleep or they're eating a lot, they don't want to go to school, they're becoming a bit withdrawn, they're a bit grumpy. And it could just be, they're going through puberty and become, a teenager and having all of those issues that go along with it as well. But it's just bearing in mind, I think the important thing is to see the change in behaviour. Okay, so in primary schools, what percentage do you think of bullying takes place in the playground? A, B, C or D? Do you think 10, 30, 75 or 90? D, pretty high. Yeah, it is high. The reports say about 75%. 75% of all bullying that happens, oh, I've gone on too quickly. Why do you think that is? Absolutely. It's much more likely to happen in a place, in an environment where there are less adults watching what's happening. You also find that children can start using an imbalance of power in the playground because they're struggling in the classroom. So they may have just sat through maths or English and having a really terrible time of it, and then they get let out into the playground and they're releasing those frustrations onto other children. So this is something when working with school staff, thinking about how to keep their playground safe, and you've sometimes got 300 kids in a space with only 2 members of staff keeping an eye on them, so that's why it's much more prevalent. This is a nice little technique that we use with the children, and this is to help them differentiate between bullying and falling out with their friends. So I hear this being used in schools quite a lot that we've been into when they're saying, oh, so-and-so won't let me play, they're bullying me. And I don't know any of us that have got children, they may have come home saying, oh, so-and-so's bullying me, mum. So we just say, so the behaviour that they're displaying, was it several times on purpose? It's a really nice one for children to remember. It stands for stop. Were they unkind several times on purpose? And quite often, when talking to children about this, they will say, oh no, it's happened, it's happened once or it's happened twice. And that just helps them to differentiate between this is me falling out with a friend and this is something that's happening on purpose. Okay. So what are the lasting effects? If a person has been bullied during their childhood, what could be the long-term effects on that person? Hugely. What was that, sorry? Yeah, absolutely. And we tend to panic as well, don't we, as parents, of what's this going to mean for their future? What's going to happen? And I know I felt like that about my daughter. And there are long-term effects. This was like 3 years ago for her, and I know her engagement in school, she doesn't enjoy school as much as I know she would have. And that's really, really saddened me, because I know that you can get so much out of your school environment, but I know that she's got the resilience to keep going and she'll be fine. Now, I was bullied throughout my first year of secondary school, which was year 1 then. Now it's year 7, isn't it? That just shows how old I am, because we used to go 1 to 5. And don't worry, this isn't a therapy session for me, okay? I'm good. But I got through it, came out the other side. It wasn't a very pleasant time, but I enjoyed school. I came out of school with a good set of GCSEs and feeling good about life, and I'm stand here now, pretty well balanced-ish. But actually, when I was 27, I just had my second daughter, and I went somewhere called, I might know where it is in this part of the country actually, Blackbush Market. Anyone heard of Blackbush? It used to be there, I don't think it exists anymore, does it? But anyway, I went there and I had both children with me in a double buggy with my mum and my dad and my husband, and we stopped for a coffee and a bacon sandwich, because that was quite a regular thing to do. And I said to my husband, here you go, I'll park the kids with you, I'll go and get the bacon sandwiches. And I queued up at this burger van. And I was thinking about what I was going to get, and then I looked as she said, yes, love, what do you want? And I looked up and I froze on the spot. I literally lost the power of speech. Now, you have only met me for 20 minutes, and you know that that would be quite important, but quite unbelievable for me to lose the power of speech. But the person that was serving, guess who she was? My bully. My bully from secondary school, from 15 years ago, And I literally, for that moment, turned back into that 11-year-old child who didn't know what to do. And I literally kind of went straight back to my husband, and he came, I think he was more upset because I arrived back without any bacon sandwiches. But actually, that's the power of what it did to me. You know, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm a confident person, and actually, long-term effects we worry about affecting people's confidence. Well, I stand up and talk in front of people for a living, so you can get through it. But actually, it took me back there. She had absolutely no idea who I was, because I was probably one of many people whose life she made a misery. But it's just to remember that actually, even though it might leave its scars, actually it doesn't mean that you can't have a bright, great future. So I do this activity with young people, and just a little flyer. It's actually a flyer of where I work, and the work that we do. And I actually quite often do it just with a blank piece of paper with the children. And I get them to say some unkind things to the piece of paper, not to me, to the piece of paper. So anybody want to shout? This is where everyone feels very uncomfortable now, thinking, why is this woman making us do role play? So would anybody like to say something unkind? So I'll start off like, oh, I hate your hair. You're all going to be really nice now, aren't you? Go on, just say it, it's fine.
I hate your shoes. You smell. Bit weighty. You're rubbish on this.
Thank you. I didn't take any of it personally, it's fine. Okay, so with every horrible thing with the children, I give them all a piece of paper and we fold it up and we make a little crease. Okay, and now we're going to say some nice things. So let's say some compliments and nice things. Everyone will be much easier with this. Ready? Thank you. I was thinking, come on, people, say some nice things.
You've got nice sparkly shoes.
Thank you very much. Which is the paper, I'm taking it personally now because I do love my sparkly shoes. Anything else?
Nice smile.
Thank you.
Good laugh.
Great, and last one.
Good to be there.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, so thank you for those lovely things, ladies. Okay, so every time we said something unkind, we folded it up. Every time we've undone it. So, did all of the nice things take away all of the horrible things?
Well, it's left creases.
So it's left some creases on here. So actually, by saying something nice, it doesn't undo the unkind things you said. Okay, because the unkind things leave their mark, don't they? But actually, is this flyer still a flyer? Still a leaflet, isn't it? I can still read everything that it says on there. It's just got a few creases. So what we don't want young people thinking is, if they've been through some of these things that leave their mark, that they don't have the same value that they had before. Well, I used to do this with a £20 note. I work for a charity, so there's not many of those £20 notes around. But actually, unfortunately, the government have gone and changed all notes, and you can't crease them anymore, can you? Which is really annoying, because if you do it with a note, you unfold it and say, so this £20 note has got creases on it, but how much is it worth? Well, it's still worth £20, regardless of the creases. And I quite often talk to the young people and say, well, you know, most of us adults get to being an adult with a few creases, which is when they start to look at my eyes and I start doing that. But actually, you know, we all get to be, you know, we can't go through life without, you know, some things knocking our confidence, or because that's what develops us. You know, it's not very nice at the time, but it makes you who you are right now. So this is quite a powerful one for young people, talking to them about things you say, things you do leave their mark, but we just need to make sure that we're aware that we can still have the same worth even after all of those things. Okay, flyer. Okay, so some pupils are both bullies and victims, true or false? Yeah. So if a child has been a victim, they are actually twice as likely as well to become a bully themselves. Can anyone think why? Yes. It's got lot to do with that power. And actually sometimes we find children that are being bullied or imbalance of power in school. Sometimes their home life is because they don't have a lot of control or power at home, so then they start to enforce that power on other children in school. So it doesn't mean they are going to, but it just means that actually 20% of victims also act as bullies. Okay, this is where technology lets me down. So what can we do? That's kind of the bit that we're here for, isn't it, really? How can we support that child? Now, I know that with my experience of what I do for a living, and also my experience as a pupil of being bullied, I thought I would be such an equipped parent if it ever happened to either of my children. And I wasn't. I really wasn't, because when you are emotively involved, then you can react quite emotionally as well. So what I would say, my biggest tip ever with working with children, or being a parent of a child, is just encourage talking. And we encourage talking within our family. We've always had news time around the table, always had, we can talk about anything. What I do for a living is I teach drug, health, sex education. So there's not really any topics that you can't talk about in my house. But actually just being able to find space and time to talk. So it's not just about saying, oh, you can tell me anything. It's also creating the time to do it. And I know as a parent before, my children have come to me saying, oh, mum, and I'm saying, oh, right in the middle of something at the minute, and actually you might be, but it might be worth saying, but I really want to talk to you about that, so can we do it in half an hour? Let me just finish this and create that time. Also, if a child wants to talk to you, it's about creating the environment for them to be able to do it in. So, minimising distractions, giving them some privacy. Also, how you're sitting with them. I know talking to my own children, the best place to ever talk to my children is in the car. It's a great time to talk. And I think a lot of the time it's because you're not facing them, there's no eye contact. And in my training of being a presenter or a trainer, one of the biggest things they tell you, the most important thing about communication is eye contact. Except if you're trying to get them to open up about something. Because there's nothing worse than saying, right, tell me how you're feeling. And staring at someone, because it puts you under an enormous pressure. Sorry to do that, you're a bit like, oh God, don't look at me. But actually it's really important that you take away those barriers. So side by side, so in a car, or I always talk when I'm talking to school staff, sitting on the bench in the playground, so you're side by side with them, so they're close proximity but don't feel like the spotlight's on them.
Do you think that's why a lot of the children say to parents at bedtime when they're in bed?
And that's the time.
Seems to be where it all comes up. He told me at 9 o'clock last night.
Absolutely. Or tends to be first thing in the morning as well. And I think and that's exactly what happened with my daughter. I was about to leave the house. I had no idea what was going on at school. And you think, I've just told you what the signs and symptoms are. I had no idea that she was being bullied. And at 6:30 in the morning, as I'm about to walk out the door to go to work, she collapses. Everything comes out. And it's because she'd been holding on until the very last minute before thinking, I have to tell someone about this. So what I had to do is, even though we encouraged talking and news time, and it had never come out during any of those times before when we always have these safe spaces, then what I had to do was encourage talking on a day-to-day basis, but in her way, at her pace. And I will say I was the biggest one at fault. Once I knew what was happening, to the minute she would walk in the door from school, how was your day? How was anything? Any problems today? Anything you need to tell me about? Did you see them? Did you? Oh. Stop and breathe. Give them some space. Let them come in. Have a drink. Have a snack. Watch TV. Do whatever it is they need to do for 20 minutes until they've acclimatised to being home, and then encourage the talking. So go at their pace with it as well. Okay. Assertiveness skills. So a great tip for young people is actually teaching them how to be assertive. A really tricky skill that we forget. And actually, as adults, we know being assertive is how we say no to things, how we keep ourselves safe. And some of the work that we do in primary school is equipping young people with assertive skills, and it's a big part of our Year 5 programme, because it's how to say no and make good choices for yourself. Actually, it's a really tricky skill, because I'm sure there are lots of us sat in this room thinking, I know plenty of adults that are not very good at being assertive, sometimes ourselves. And for children, where this can go wrong for them is if they try to be assertive, but they end up becoming aggressive. Because it's quite a fine line, actually. Or they go the other way and become very passive and encourage their own vulnerability again. So some assertiveness skills, teaching them how to say no, how to be confident, respect themselves whilst respecting the other person. That's really important. Okay, praise. Now, if I only ever have one top tip on how to manage children's behaviour and increase their self-esteem, it's praise. We do it lots and lots in our teaching. We teach in a very positive way. And there's a really good reason why we tell kids nice stuff and praise them. Anyone think why? Sorry?
Makes them feel good.
Absolutely. And that's the best tonic you can give them. Because if a child is being bullied, their self-esteem is pretty low. So if you can tell them what it is that's really great about them and help to boost that self-esteem and keep them going, that is just gold to those children. Now, it has to be genuine. You know, just go around praising lots of stuff. It has to be genuine. It has to be about them. And it's to make them feel good. Now, the reason we do it in behaviour management is because it helps us to repeat the behaviour that we like to see. But in this kind of situation, we use it for their self-esteem to keep them going. Okay, what else do we do? Okay, so this is obviously to talk about cyberbullying. It's a really easy statement, isn't it? Know what they're doing online. Anyone else struggle with that one as a parent?
Impossible.
Bordering on impossible, absolutely. It's a real challenge, you know, and this statement comes from, you know, the whole online safety thing of encourage them to use the home computer that's in the middle of the lounge, and, you know, so everyone can see what's, well, those days are gone, because they're doing it all on here, which is a handheld device that goes into their pocket, and you've no idea what's going on. What I do, and especially when I knew what was going on with my daughter, was encourage her to talk to me about what was happening online. My first instincts as a parent, because a lot of my daughter's issues went on online, as they are lots of young people I work with. And the first reaction as a parent, or even as a professional sometimes as an adult, is to say, right, well, just don't engage online. Well, take yourself off those sites, take yourself out of those group chats, and that will solve the issue. Most young people, even if they are being bullied and experiencing some pretty unkind things being said to them online, they will want to stay part of that group. And that's quite a hard one for us as adults to get our head round. And young people have said to me, but at least if I'm online, I can see what's being said. And if I'm not there, the not knowing is worse than the knowing. And I would just say, well, talk to them about it then. Because if they're insisting on staying online, you will find it, like you've said, near on impossible to withdraw them from it, unless you take away every handheld device, you know, switch off the Wi-Fi, which sees children going to meltdown. It's about encouraging them to talk about it. I would say if we get into quite a crisis point, you know, and things are really progressing and really quite horrendous online, then you may have to invoke some parental controls over what's going on online. Open to talk, as I said, make sure you have the time in your day. And again, no pressure. Don't do what I did. Tell me everything, tell me now what's going on, because that just puts an awful amount of pressure on them.
I just say that knowing what they're doing online is knowing when they're doing it as well.
Yeah.
So mobile phones in bedrooms.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's definitely a part of the parental control, and saying actually, oh, but I need it to, because I use it as my alarm clock. Well, I'll buy you an alarm clock. I need it to keep it charged up. Well, we charge it downstairs. So it's about allowing them access, but not 24/7 access, because that's when we start to reach crisis point when they can't switch off from it. You know, childhood these days is a very different place to it was when I was young. So even when I experienced my problems at school, actually when I came home, my home was my safe haven, and I could switch off from it. And children these days aren't afforded that luxury. So it's about us having that control. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Allow maybe 2 or 3 hours access, you know, or an hour's access when they get in, so they feel like they're still being involved what's online, but definitely not throughout the night. Okay, so listen to our child, and that probably should be at the top of the list. Because however we react, whatever we're going to do to support this young person, they have to be at the centre of it. They have to be part of the decision making. And there's an extremely good reason. Because a child that is being bullied and experiencing these really, really awful problems, their power has been stripped from them. Another child or another person has taken that power away from them. So what we need to do is, when we're going to support them in managing this difficulty, we need to make sure we're giving them their power back. How do you want me to deal with it? Now, if it's anything like my daughter or an awful lot of young people that I've worked with, when I talk to them about being bullied, they will say, I don't want you to do anything. I don't want you to do anything. I don't want you to say anything. And when we said about talk to the school, I don't want you to talk to school. I don't want you to, you know, definitely don't want you to go around to the parent's house and try and deal with it. And the one thing I would always say to that young person is, what have we done so far? What's happened so far to stop this happening? Nothing. And how's that helped? Has the situation been resolved by doing nothing? So however much we want to be able to say to them, okay, we'll play it your way, we won't do anything, that's not going to help. So we have to do something, but put them at the centre of the control of what we do. And there are schools, and this is what I mean when schools deal with it differently. So there are lots of different things schools can put into place. We would definitely go and talk to the school. But what we would do is, with our young person, with our child, we'd take them to school, the pupil that we're working with, we'd sit down and have a discussion with them. How would you like us to deal with this? What could we do that's going to make you feel safer here? Schools have lots and lots of ways of dealing with it, but what I would say is, let's not take over control. I know some schools are really into restorative justice. Let's get the bully and the victim in the same room together and let's talk about it. Well, actually, that was a suggestion for my daughter. And I know lots of other schools use it. And it has its place. You know, it can be a really, really good method. But what's really important is that child that's being bullied, that they're okay with that. Because actually, do they want to sit in a room with the child that's been making their life hell? The likely it is. They don't even want to be in the same building as them. So it's really important that if that's the decision that's going to be, suggested, that they're in agreement with it and they're happy with it and they're talked through all of the processes with them. Okay, what else have we got? Talk to the school. So yeah, we have to. And again, it's about putting the young person right at the centre of it. What I've done when working with young people who have disclosed bullying before we've gone to the school is we've had a conversation. I've done it with my own children and other children. What do you want us to say? We're going to go into the school. What do you want that conversation to look like? Because if you don't have the conversation first, they're going to go into that room and they're going to freeze. And they might likely cry and not be able to come out with things because they're going to have all those emotions running through their head. So it's a good idea to write a plan with them first. What would you like us to talk about and discuss? Seek support. As a parent, I know this is a really, really challenging thing to deal with. So seek support for your child, but it's okay to seek support for yourself as well. Who do you have to talk to about this? Are there agencies out there that you can get advice from? Is there someone within your family that you can have who's you're confident to be able to talk through your emotions as well? Because the more equipped you are, the more you're going to be able to support your child. Yeah, support at home as well for your health, support at school. help to build confidence for them with those assertive skills, but also just reminding them that they're not at fault. Nobody has the right to do this to them. So they have the right to seek this support and seek to take back some of the control at school. And breathe. That's my top tip for parents. Breathe. Remember, this is really hard. Don't beat yourself up for it. You know, you're doing your very best to support your child through it. But breathe and take a little bit of space. Whatever you do, whatever decisions you make, just remember to put your child right at the centre of it and let them know that they're the most important person in this.